Tonight's story isn't about a battle. It isn't even about a country. It's about a chain reaction. One that military analysts quietly study but rarely describe publicly. Because once it begins, nobody controls how it ends. Right now, somewhere in the world, decisions are being made in rooms without windows, by people who understand one terrifying truth. Modern wars don't start with explosions. They start with assumptions. An assumption that the other side will step back. An assumption that escalation will stop. An assumption that history will behave the way it always has. But history has a pattern. Every major global conflict began with leaders believing the situation was still manageable, right up until the moment it wasn't. And tonight, we're going to walk through a question experts are quietly asking behind closed doors. What actually happens if this conflict spreads? Not speculation, not fear-mongering, but a step-by-step look at how modern systems, military, economic, technological, and psychological, react when pressure crosses a critical threshold. Because the most dangerous part of modern war is that most people wouldn't recognize the beginning of it. In modern warfare, escalation rarely looks dramatic at first. There's no announcement, no clear starting line. Instead, it begins with something small enough to feel temporary, a strike described as limited, a response labeled defensive, a statement carefully worded to calm markets rather than reveal intentions. For ordinary people watching the news, it appears contained, but inside military command centers, analysts don't focus on what happened. They focus on what must happen next, because every action creates pressure, and pressure demands response. Imagine two people standing on opposite sides of a narrow bridge. Neither wants to fight, but neither wants to step backward either. Each movement forward forces the other to react, not out of aggression, but credibility. In geopolitics, credibility can matter more than safety. If a nation appears unwilling to respond,
markets are crashing. Get legal on the line. I'm on it. Trading desks are panicking.
Confirm.
Breaking news feed is live.
Begin testing boundaries. So even leaders who want calm may feel forced to escalate simply to maintain stability. And this is where modern conflicts become dangerous. Because escalation today isn't driven by emotion, it's driven by systems. In past wars, escalation depended on armies moving across borders. Today, escalation can begin invisibly. Cyber operations targeting infrastructure, satellite interference disrupting communications, financial sanctions reshaping entire economies overnight. None of these look like war to civilians, but to defense analysts, they are signals, measurable steps along an escalation ladder, and each step reduces available exits. Think of it like descending stairs in darkness. Each step feels manageable, until suddenly, you realize the staircase has no visible bottom. Military planners call this commitment momentum. Once resources, reputation, and alliances become involved, stopping becomes harder than continuing. And history shows something unsettling. Most large conflicts weren't chosen deliberately. They emerged from reactions that leaders believed were temporary. A century ago, distance slowed escalation. Today, distance barely exists. A single regional conflict immediately affects global oil supply, shipping routes, financial markets, cybersecurity networks, alliance obligations, which means countries not directly involved begin preparing anyway. Air defenses activate, naval fleets reposition, intelligence sharing increases. None of this signals war to the public, but collectively, it changes the global posture. And once multiple nations begin preparing simultaneously, misunderstandings multiply. Radar signals misinterpreted, military exercises mistaken for mobilization, defensive actions perceived as offensive planning. History repeatedly shows that wars often expand not because leaders wanted expansion, but because uncertainty made caution look like weakness. So the real question isn't whether one event causes global escalation. The real question is this: at what point does preparation itself become indistinguishable from aggression? Because when every side believes it is acting defensively, conflict can grow without anyone intending it to. And that leads to the next phase, the moment analysts consider the true turning point. Not the first strike, not the retaliation, but the moment alliances begin moving, And for a while, nothing else happened. No breaking alerts, no official announcements, just silence. The kind of silence that feels temporary, like the world is holding its breath. But slowly, people began noticing something else. Not louder, not dramatic, just different. The conversations online had changed. Where fear once spread quickly, hesitation started appearing. Comments asking questions instead of making claims. People pausing before sharing. And strangely, engagement numbers began falling. Not everywhere, but enough for analysts to notice. Daniel noticed it first in the data. The same networks that had amplified anxiety weeks earlier were suddenly losing momentum. Videos predicting disaster stopped reaching large audiences. Emotionally charged posts suddenly stopped going viral. It felt as if something invisible had loosened its grip. At first, researchers believed platform updates were responsible. Algorithm changes happened constantly. But when Daniel compared timelines, nothing matched any official adjustment. The shift had begun earlier, before any intervention, which meant the change wasn't technological. It was human. Across multiple regions, people began reacting differently online. Instead of instantly sharing alarming content, viewers paused. Some verified sources, others simply scrolled past. A small behavioral change, but multiplied across millions of users. It transformed the entire digital environment. Systems designed to amplify emotion rely on reaction, and reaction depends on attention. Remove attention, and the system weakens. Daniel later explained it with a simple analogy, shouting into a canyon. If echoes return, you keep shouting, but if the canyon suddenly absorbs sound, eventually you stop trying. Within weeks, digital activity stabilized, search trends normalized, late-night panic discussions faded. Even nationwide sleep data showed improvement. The invisible pressure seemed to ease. Yet one detail troubled Daniel. The system hadn't disappeared. It had only gone quiet. Late one night, while reviewing archived engagement maps, he noticed familiar patterns emerging again, not in the United States, but overseas. Different language, different audience, yet identical emotional triggers, timing patterns, and behavioral signals. The realization unsettled him deeply. The system hadn't failed. It had adapted, moving toward places where attention was more vulnerable. Daniel finally understood what experts had warned for years. Modern conflict doesn't always target infrastructure. Sometimes it studies psychology, waiting for uncertainty to appear, and then amplifying it. Fear doesn't need to be created, only encouraged. Months later, during a research conference, Daniel was asked what frightened him most. After a long pause, he answered, not the technology or coordination, but how normal everything felt while it was happening. People believed they were acting independently, watching what interested them, sharing what felt important, unaware their emotions were being gently guided. Today, Daniel keeps most notifications turned off, not out of fear, but understanding. Every alert competes for attention. Every headline demands emotion. Every reaction feeds something larger than the individual user. Sometimes, late at night, he scrolls through trending videos, watching patterns rise, fade, and reappear elsewhere. And he remembers the conclusion of his report. Wars are no longer defined only by borders or weapons. Sometimes they are fought silently, between information and belief. And the outcome depends on something simple. Whether people react instantly, or choose to think first.